you entered this from a philosophical point of view. You come from a slightly different way, a different route into the crypto space, where this whole thing, and this was the ethos that the early adopters of Bitcoin had, is this idea of self-sovereignty, that I am in control of my own body. I am in control of my thoughts. I'm in control of my own beliefs, and I will control my finances. So if you look at what has happened with Bitcoin, we've gone from that to the point where everything on the blockchain is visible. Now this was by design. You know, every transaction, the only thing that's not visible, you have an address. But now with KYC, know your customer regulations, you can attach a name to this string of numbers. Have we lost the plot here from your point of view?
I'm asking, have we lost the plot on being self-sovereign?
Well, the privacy is gone.
The privacy aspect.
Yeah.
I don't know if self-sovereignty and privacy necessarily goes hand in hand. I suppose the reason that it would go hand in hand is because obviously you don't want to become a target of criminals or people discovering an identity behind your wealth, right? So I'm thinking, how would the regime of KYC and regulation and all of this that we now see develop prohibit self-sovereignty? Well, how do you define it? Can we define self-sovereignty as your ability to store your own wealth? Can we limit it there, or does it have to be that you also anonymous, have absolute privacy? Does that have to be an aspect of self-sovereignty?
No, I think what I was really getting at there is the ability to transact without the authorities knowing.
So that's my question. Would being self-sovereign necessarily mean that the authorities don't know about it, or would self-sovereign mean that you can voluntarily engage in commerce with another individual without an oppressive regime, for example, blocking you? Does that have to be anonymous? That's my question.
I can't answer that.
Maybe if I could come in, you know, what we've heard a lot from a lot of users, I think we've obviously recently implemented things like travel rule, which effectively, where we effectively share information across exchanges.
Okay, so explain the travel rule. That's where you got to declare any amount above 5,000 Rand.
Well, actually, South Africa doesn't have a limit, transactional threshold at all. So it's any amount.
Any amount.
Yeah, so it wouldn't necessarily
even if it's 100 Rand.
Absolutely. So how we would need to do it is, for instance, as and when you would invest in, you know, let's say, for example, you want to send Larry a token, or you want to send him X amount of BNB or Bitcoin, and it's a different exchange. So what effectively the travel rule implements, and maybe just to step back slightly. So travel rule stems from it's effectively taken directly from TradFi, right? Where effectively the parties on either side know exactly who's transacting, and they're able to share that information in the event that the authorities either need to investigate for various purposes. So what the travel rule does, you know, it's taken from the Financial Action Task Force Recommendation 16. I'm sure you'd have heard a lot about the FATF post the South Africa's grey listing, and now that we're off the grey list. And one of the pain points was actually the implementation of the travel rule. Now, often when we create laws, the question you always need to ask: what is the ill that this law seeks to address? What's the mischief? That's always the question. Now, in the context of the travel rule, the mischief was always the ability which maybe, you know, and it does touch slightly on self-sovereignty, the ability of people to send transactions to people anonymously and almost, I don't want to say escape undetected, but for various reasons. Now, what travel rule effectively does is that, given the problems, you know, we've got globally around terrorist financing, that's a major issue. One of the others, I think you made mention of it earlier, was regarding scams, money laundering, people effectively being robbed of their life savings. And what travel rule enables us to do is to track exactly who payments transactions are made to. It's really becoming, I think, a lot of crypto natives, you know, with very libertarian views would probably argue that we've effectively betrayed you know, the whole the genesis of crypto assets and why they were created. But, you know, my argument there is always that effectively innovation must be consistent and congruent with consumer protection, because where we let the one override the other, I think you then fall into the, I think for a long time crypto assets were deemed to be scams, and that was one of the reasons. Someone would come, they offer larger than life returns, and in a South African environment, you look at the economic circumstances, people generally lean towards that. And then, we have life savings wiped out, the person ups and leaves, and you're never able to find them again. I think we've got quite a few examples of that. And that's the reason why we've actually had to build in risk controls. One of those is travel rule. Others are obviously know your client, know your business, and we've ensured that. And it's obviously a sliding scale as well. When we risk rate clients, we don't do it, it's not one size fits all. I think Larry might mention it, but we employ a risk-based approach. If you're really just going to be transacting at a personal level, not transacting using third-party funds, we're slightly more relaxed, but of course we do ramp it up. And the rationale is to ultimately ensure that we protect the ecosystem, because that's the most important thing.